Yucho Chow was Vancouver Chinatown's very first Chinese photographer, but he was more than that. What we learned through this discovery process was he was the photographer for almost all the marginalized communities at that time. We're talking about between 1906 and 1949. So he was the main photographer for the early Sikh Canadian community, the Black Canadian community, the Aboriginal community, as well as many Eastern Europeans from the Ukraine, Poland, and other places like that. The biggest challenge in getting this exhibition together was that his work was lost. When his studio closed, his sons closed his studio in 1986, all those decades of negatives were taken to the dump. And they thought it was just a business. So to be fair to them, it was just a business. Who would want these things? But I kept seeing his work in so many family albums, and I spent the last 8 years finding these photos, one family at a time, one photo at a time, to a massive collection of almost 300 photos, of which 80 are on display. There are two interesting things about Yucho Chow and the time in which he photographed. First of all, he photographed through a very tumultuous time and a very transformative time in our city's history. He was around when the first head tax came in. Through the First World War, he photographed. Through the Chinese Exclusion Act, where Chinese were barred from coming to Canada. Through the Great Depression, he survived and photographed through the Second World War and all the way to the winning of citizenship for Chinese Canadians. So that was a remarkable period of time. But at the same time, it was a period where for so many other groups, like for example, Sikh Canadians, they could not go to a tailor and get a suit made, a white tailor. They could not, a white barber would not cut their hair, and a white photographer would not take their photos. So they wound up in the studio of Yucho Chow, and he welcomed them with open arms, and in turn, they actually welcomed him into their community. He became the chief chronicler of their early history here in Vancouver. The main lesson, I think, in looking at his work is that we're all the same when it really comes down to it. There was a real sort of value judgment against certain kind of people, that they were less, and because they were dark-skinned or they practiced different religions. And yet when you see this body of work together, you see how similar we are. And we purposely decided to show the photos in groupings. So photos of families, photos of children, photos of weddings. And that's where you begin to see that no matter what your skin color or your religion or your background, or even your social status or your wealth, that there were all these commonalities. We essentially had the same values. We essentially had the same aspirations. We wanted to capture our memories of these moments in our lives, and we wanted to be remembered through photographs.